Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie List. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Number 37. Benedict Cumberbatch was the star and producer of the movie The Electrical Life of Louis Wayne, which is a movie that I regretted started once I was 20 minutes in, but is further proof that I have a hard time turning off a movie. And I don't mean it as an objectively bad movie. It just really is not for me, but I will tell you how I felt. It felt obnoxious from Benedict's acting, to his families, to the people who like him, the people who don't. Plus, eventually, it's for the kids. Louis Wayne is a notable figure in history who made cats a domestic pet, in part because of his love for them, seen in his paintings of them, which became the ultimate marketing for people to want them in their British households. Maybe that is the problem. I am a dog guy, but that's not really it. It is more a tone issue and some fussy melodramatic British stuff led by an actor who lately I'm getting sick of. So if you usually agree with my takes, avoid this one. Number 36. There are a lot of reasons, I think, for why Spencer did not work for me as a movie. The first maybe being that I'm not all that familiar with the story of Princess Diana, and the movie decided that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable to me, though. I think the movie should not have to rely on exterior knowledge walking into the movie. The filmmaking should illuminate that information to me, because this seemed like a lawn mope fest. I want to get a better sense why Princess Diana was so frustrated. Not that she was just frustrated, but anyways, I think another reason is Kristen Stewart's performance, even though this critic is a fan, was hard not to see her and not get lost in someone else playing the princess. Sometimes I don't like someone's face, and then it's all downhill in terms of the relationship with that person. And sadly, that was the case with a lot of the supporting cast. So while there are some interesting scenes with the kids, this movie left me uninterested almost immediately. Number 35. There are a lot of weird movies, or let us say more specifically, there are a lot of movies that are narratively untraditional, but we all know that Mother is not as good as 2001: A Space Odyssey. Personally, sometimes it's fun or funny to be confused in a movie, but the movie Memoria left me uninspired as a cinema enthusiast. It starts to sometimes blame Tilda Swinton walking around trying to understand this loud thumping noise that haunts her. The movie is her doing a lot of this and that, and then there is this totally unearned last shot that made me laugh out of contempt. But I also laughed when a character lies down to die for a few minutes and rises. So while the movie did not work for me because it did not go anywhere, had a ludicrous ending, and was overall unsatisfying to watch as a viewer, and it had some funny moments, which hopefully were calculated. Number 34. Coronavirus movies are a new subgenre of cinema, which may not excite you as a concept on paper, should not be outright dismissed as they vary in terms of quality from what has come to us so far. The Falls comes from South Korea, and it looks at a woman's mental breakdown, as well as her support system coming from her daughter, as well as her new menial job. The movie is pretty decent, but a little boring. I found myself not all that invested in things once the mental break happens. It is like a mini ending to the movie halfway through at first. She seems just on the verge and you are more invested. Then essentially was over dramatically for me. And it's not my least favorite coronavirus movie, but just because Squid Games and Parasite are huge, does not mean that the industry was changed all that much in South Korea. There are still good and bad movies. Number 33. I loved what France had to offer during the Toronto International Film Festival in 2021. Both Titan as well as France were modern-day masterpieces to me. But from what I saw from Belgium, it was a little bit more uneven from my experience. I loved Inexorable with its 90s romantic thriller tone, but Earwig was a film I was less enamored with. It is a strange, dark movie, but void of the kind of passion I like from dark content, even miserable content. It is primarily an evil-intentioned father with a daughter who eventually attempts to leave the harsh confines, which has some interesting shots in it, from composition to lighting, and dramatically it left me cold. It was kind of boring to me, even though there are some weird performances and nice production. It just did not have enough thickness in story to justify the way it was done, from my perspective, of course. Number 32. Silent Night is a Christmas movie that really evolves in its plot from one thing to something entirely different, and I found it to be more jarring than effective, even though I wasn't really into either half of the movie. Even though the plot twist makes it not quite a halfway pivot, it becomes almost another film entirely. Certainly it's not recognizable from the first movie, which is all about a weird group of friends celebrating Christmas. Some of the kids are really funny, and although it realistically depicts aging friends, none of the acting here really intrigued me all too much. So this was from the start, a movie that would not work for me personally. The last bit comes from nowhere and really sticks out in a way that does disservice to the experience. Granted, one that I was not all that into, but it still manages to go off the rails. And I guess I only watched this because it was interesting to know that Keira Knightley was in a movie that was not a period piece. Number 31. You Are Not My Mother is somewhere between a pretty good and an almost very good horror movie. It comes from Ireland and deals with changeling folkloric mythology, which can easily be interpreted from a mental health perspective. As you can probably guess from the title, a demon or some malevolent entity has possessed the protagonist's mother, making her appear to not be the same person anymore, unfortunately. When someone suffers mentally, they can appear to be a shadow of their former self, and therefore unrecognizable, and it should be said that in our increasingly secular world, exorcisms are still performed, making some of this stuff ring true. This movie is good stuff, but does not stand out as excellent use of its material. Some of the scares are creepy, and some of them are pretty lame. It is still pretty neat that Ireland is making horror movies at all, specifically something to do with their own folklore. Number 30. Things are not as simple as they seem in The Other Tom, which looks at a mother who is not into the idea of putting her son on medication despite an ADHD diagnosis, because we as viewers do not get that conclusive take as to whether she is right or wrong. The actors are authentically cast, and they add a lot of grit to their roles, but sometimes the line delivery is a little fudged. That is inevitable, but they still stick around in your head because of their realness. In a world where sometimes we are judged by not fitting the mold, it is refreshing to see a story where you have to make up your own mind whether it is ethical or not, given your own set of ideas around this topic. Movies with lovable but debatably irresponsible mother figures are fun. And between the topical relevance, this movie is pretty entertaining, so if you like chaotic dramas, then consider The Other Tom. Number 29. There has been a lot of anticipation for Denis Villeneuve's Dune, and at the Venice Film Festival it was revealed that it is just a movie. It has fans and haters just like anything else, and in the end, I found it to be weaker than I had anticipated. Let us start with what works. The visuals are really on point. I love the design of it, and there is some creepiness that is much darker than we get from most big-budgeted science fiction films. Also, the opening 10 minutes set up a very interesting story. In my opinion, the simple things of a story get lost in the details of the world within that it is set in, and it is also quite long at 2.5 hours, so at the halfway mark, I was waiting for things to get wrapped up. The hype was real for me, so it hurts me to document a negative take on the experience, but I will end with my conclusion that Dune is most likely an unfilmable story. There is too much detailed lore here, and seeing both movies in my mind, I do not think it can be tackled. Number 28. Medusa looks at Brazil's current move to fascism and the resistance against that in a tale that is all too familiar on an international level, sadly, but the movie is a lot of vibrant, colorful fun within an essentially dramatic story. We get televangelist vibes, slut-shaming, and young people all together butting heads for a dramatic story that is fun in nature despite being about serious issues and has a dystopic feeling while being based on reality. The acting style is a little bit different in South America than what we are accustomed to from Hollywood, so expect it all to be a little bit more over the top, so adjust your expectations and timing for a watch of this appropriately. If you want to escape reality by amplifying it and see how connected we are nowadays, then you will probably enjoy Medusa, which is a movie I really liked and fits in nicely with great projects like Last Days of Gilda from Brazil. Number 27. Director Evan Jackson Leon is a documentary filmmaker who just successfully released his feature film debut, focusing on the American Triads. It had a troubled production, but made its way to the Toronto International Film Festival. The feature is called Snakehead, and it looks at a real triad matriarch, but shifts things around, notably the period. Horian was in New York in the 1980s, and this happens to take place in contemporary times. With Chen-Chi paving new roads for Asian American actors, this movie is a fun gangster watch. While it is not made with the precision or uniqueness of a John Woo triad movie or a Takashi Kitano Yakuza movie, it is still fun. While the plot and visuals are solid within a generic cinema, some of the supporting actors shine, and the female-focused part of the story is a surprise within the gangster cinema, making it one to look out for. Number 26. If some of your favorite movies include Paris, Texas, and Days of Heaven, then you might really go for the movie Saint Anne, which manages to cinematically be a slice of real life as well as fractured and dreamlike. It looks at a day in life on a Manitoba reservation and can cut from moment to moment in the scene structure of the film, making it sort of a dream and an appropriate pick for the wavelength section in the Toronto International Film Festival. That was interesting to me. Although not entirely captivating, it has to be respected for its use of creativity with a budget that is more memorable than people simply talking outside. Rain Vermette is the director, and it is her first feature, although she has done shorts. So I really do look forward to seeing more from her in the future. Even if this did not carry me throughout the movie, it is still an interesting experience. Number 25. Low-key ambient vibes are the aesthetic scene in To Kill the Beast, where the substance is about coming out in the LGBTQ plus community in Brazil. I feel even homophobes can enjoy the feeling this movie provides. I don't know how many homophobes even watch movies from the foreign film market. If they happen to watch this film, I hope it lets loose some hatred in their hearts. This movie is a fun exercise in style. I like the feeling of the still of the night being shook by the movie's sound design, filled with fun, yet not over-the-top animal sense that tries to wake up something in all of us, even if it simply confirms your identity or sympathy to the LGBTQ plus community. The movie has a nice low-key vibe, so make sure you're in the right frame of mind, because it could put you to sleep. Ideally watch this on a Sunday morning with a hot drink to wake up to something inclusive and pleasant to the senses. Number 24. The movie Arthur Rambeau is a smooth-toned, low-key drama from France, which looks at online identity fragmentation, but I never felt major stakes, nor did I really feel like I learned much about the internet. Arthur Rambeau is Twitter handle, but it is a persona of an author named Karam D, of a Middle Eastern immigrant in Europe, who writes one way about his experience and tweets about it another way. The respectable author Karam D will go on TV and present a Martin Luther King approach, which is basically the stiff upper lip stoic approach. Dress well, carry yourself with pride, then people will begin to respect you. The Arthur Rambeau Twitter approach is much more of a Malcolm X approach, which is identifying the situation as a villainous Caucasian deliberate ploy to oppress people of color, and it's Twitter, so there is a lot of smack talk. Pretty early on in the story, the reveal is made that Karam D is Arthur Rambeau, so Karam implodes, loses his career, and people move on from him, and that's about it. Now you know the concept. But believe me, this movie is an intelligent one-trick pony that I still like. Number 23. Albert Chin directed the feature Disappearance at Clifton Hill, which played at TIFF in 2019. So it was interesting to learn that he will return not with a feature, but a short in 2021 called Together. It is a pretty dark concept, but not a hard watch. It shows two South Koreans hanging out with each other before committing suicide, showing even in the darkest possible situation, there can be levity in this world. Number 22. The short called Beneath the Hidden Island of Ethics will surely offend some Christians, because Jesus Christ is a character here who represents the historical ills of the Catholic Church to the indigenous community. There's a female character who represents the indigenous community, and they are both trying to woo an indigenous child to their receptive ways, and it's because it is provocative that a discussion will follow. It is a consequential piece of art. Number 21. The Panthers is a TV show from New Zealand, which is not about the Black Panthers, but the Polynesian Panthers, who are a group of young people doing activism in mainland New Zealand for islander rights. As someone who knows truly nothing about this local history, it was a fun show despite political righteousness. These political leaders are very young, naive, yet totally likable. It is a nice cast that departs from reality appropriately. The research was done first, so there is authenticity, but freeness to the biographical material. There is even a hip-hop narrator to the show, which should indicate to you that this is not a totally straight 1970s historical romp. I liked all the actors, the Trump parallels with a rising right-wing politician in the show, as well as the easygoing tone for a show that has the right to be angrier, but wants to keep you locked in with very likable characters. Number 20. Rage about Palestine in regard to treatment by the Israelis, specifically the Bedouin community, is what the documentary The Devil's Drivers is about. And interestingly, the project is co-directed by a Palestinian and an Israeli. The documentary was made over a course of years, and what we see is these drivers who smuggle Bedouin people into Israel to work to bring back some bread to their starving community. These drivers are risking their lives and sometimes not, outrunning the Israeli fuzz to help the Bedouin community out. And while it is a Talking Heads documentary, these driving scenes give it a William Friedkin action movie vibe. Think The French Connection or To Live and Die in L.A., where practical chases are done. None of this Fast and Furious sort of stuff. This documentary looks at an angle of injustice in Israel, but also has some excitement attached to it. Number 19. The documentary Hold Your Fire is a captivating documentary, from the way the interviews are cut together to the way the archival shots are put together, leading one to conclude that a feature film on the subject is a great idea. It tells the story of a holdup in Brooklyn in 1973 by 3 young black men who hold the store hostage in a police standoff that lasted for nearly 2 days, and we hear from many people as well as family members who are affected by this event. The cops might seem insensitive and callous in many of their remarks. The men responsible for the crime are remorsefully reflective about their action, and there was another man named Harvey Schlossberg who is the definitive interest to this story. He was an NYPD psychologist who created the hostage negotiation technique, which was used in this incident in 1973 for the very first time, which puts an emphasis on dialogue over violence, a practice that is unfortunately underused globally. Number 18. While watching the Canadian vampire movie Kicking Blood, I felt it was influenced by George Romero's Martin. Then after reflecting on it, I realized it really is not too much like that movie. Thinking about it now, I think the similarity is perhaps the human ways vampires are shown in both movies. While Martin is more realistically visually, Kicking Blood seems more emotionally grounded for a Shocktober flick like this. Also visually, I thought at first that this movie being included in TIFF, was a stretch, but by the end, I concluded that it does have themes as well as plot twists that elevate it from a mid-budgeted Canadian horror film. I would not say that these highbrow qualities will convert drama-exclusive film fans to this horror movie, but fans of horror who still wanted an original take on a familiar genre will probably like this one a lot. Number 17. Director Denis Goulet's Night Riders is the largest budgeted Canadian movie ever attained by an Aboriginal director in this country. It reminds me a bit of a lot of movies, from Mad Max to Blood Quantum. It is like Mad Max as well as other post-apocalyptic movies such as Escape from New York, because that is the genre it is in. But it is also like Blood Quantum because it takes contemporary Indigenous issues and filters them through genre. You can take the message or theme of the movie as seriously as you want to, but you'll most certainly find the movie entertaining because that is what it puts in the forefront, which is a wonderful thing. Night Raiders looks at a post-nuke scenario where a mother and daughter's bond and reunification after a set of disturbing events in the is the storyline. There's plenty of action and universal themes seen in this movie. Number 16. The actor who gives the best death glare in cinematic history, yes, in my opinion, is John Philip Law, who does the wide-eyed, scary, yet still campy look in the Italian genre classics Danger Diabolique and Death Rides a Horse. In Paca, aka River of Blood, there's one character who's not actually a primary character who gives a scary, non-campy John Philip Law style glare, which I can still feel while documenting this. The movie tells the story of a beef between two Indian families, and there is a river where we get plenty of scenes of water, with one older character being there whose job it is to fish bodies from underwater. This is no Bollywood movie, this is dark stuff, and it has a lot of merit in my opinion. This is no Bollywood movie, this is dark stuff, and it has a lot of merit in my opinion, as well as Cameron Bailey's. So if you like effectively balanced broodiness in your movies, I am confident in recommending this film to you. Number 15. Melanie Laurent was a lot of fun to watch in Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds. Then I began watching a French movie she was in, but amazingly I bailed from the movie, which is a very rare thing for me to do. I don't even remember the name of that one. But she directed The Mad Woman's Ball, and even though it was a tough watch, it was substantively rewarding and of a good degree of quality to make me recommend it to some people. You need to have a stomach for this. It deals with a 19th century insane asylum for females, and this little get-together, a ball, is held in the end, with some things occurring that are highly emotionally disturbing without being too graphic. If you can read Crime and Punishment, you can get through this movie. But if you can only watch Marvel movies, then skip this one. It is like a pretty good novel trying to be very good, and it is certainly a top-tier contemporary French movie. Number 14. I have written before that I think the foreign film market can help break down assumptions of other cultures, and that was certainly my experience while watching Cacho, a movie from Guatemala. This is, to my recollection, the only movie I have seen from the country, and the majority of the cast were hired for their authenticity, not their experience. So there was a sense of life lived that permeated from the framed images. It also does not hurt that it was a well-done, violent gangster movie, not just an authentic travelogue, because I do love the gangster genre. This one is not a classic, but maybe the follow-up to this one will get us a step closer to that reality. I like the female angles of this. The last scene of the movie really resonates with the violence to the vulnerability, to the timing we get from the paced rhythmic shots. So gangster movie fans, wait till you see Cacho Blanco. Number 13. The latest movie from Terence Davies is a biopic about British poet Siegfried Sassoon, set during the World War I era, in a movie that I think is an excellent experience in misery, an angle that plenty of dramatic movies take. The man might have been a brilliant poet, but being gay in this period could not have been easy. There is plenty of promiscuity seen in this movie, as well as the misery that follows by being potentially ostracized from society if you are outed. Siegfried was also anti-war, which lands him a trip to the psych ward. And we get a lot of scenes of people talking in rooms while still keeping your attention. This movie is 2 hours and 17 minutes, so you better be up for it if you want to give it a gander. This is also my first experience watching the Terence Davies movies, but I know he has fans out there. They've told me so, and they were excited to hear my thoughts about this. I would say it is a very good one, verging on greatness. Number 12. Coming from Senegal is the genre movie Saloum, which, for an easy capsule review, is today's African version of Robert Rodriguez's 1995 movie From Dusk Till Dawn. That is definitely the easiest way to nail it down. The tough guy gangster part is the better part of this movie, in my opinion, and in From Dusk Till Dawn, it is the vampire stuff I found more compelling. With Saloum, the occult stuff is sort of weird looking and vague thematically. When it's about the gangsters on the run, though, and even cohesively, this movie is exciting toughness that should be of interest to genre fans, as well as people who follow African cinema. Even though it is no Hollywood, it gets wild. It is definitely not with Hollywood or like Nollywood, and it's not trying to make fun of its budget in a cockeyed way. It's trying to get you to take African films seriously, so check it out and see if you think it should be. Number 11. The movie Zavala from Iran can easily be said to be the Iranian version of The Exorcist, and it is certainly that. But it looks at the Kurdish folklore of jinn, which are mischievous spirits that we should all be avoiding. The idea is that human beings came from the soil, and jinn are spirits that are of fire, so elementally we can't mix. We can't understand jinn. They may not be evil, but we cannot understand their intentions. That is what the director, as well as his co-writer and spouse, told me. I had no frame of reference for this folklore, so it was a lot to take in. But it is now my belief there should be more movies based on cultural folklore. Jinn is not Satan, so while this movie has people freaking out about Jinn and converting the skeptical protagonist to their understanding, so while structurally it is like The Exorcist, Jinn is still distinguishably different than the demonic. Number 10. The plot of Neptune Frost is harder to recall than the atmosphere of the movie, which is pure magic. It is an African musical cyber trip fest, which was conceived as a play around 10 years ago and morphed into this movie. It looks at our digital environment, sort of. It is directed by rapper Saul Williams, whose music I felt was closer to slam poetry, especially visually. The man has always truly been hard to fit into a mold, so I was very interested to see his directorial debut. While it can be a little too manic, that is also what there is to celebrate with this movie. You want to hear the songs and feel stoned watching the kaleidoscope filter shots that come more frequently near the end of the movie. While I didn't always like the acting and found things a little hard to follow, that was alright for me, because this is a trip fest movie, and it accomplishes creating a strange environment to lounge in for a while. Number 9, the movie 1 Second by Jang Yimou was a great pick to close the 2021 edition of the Toronto International Film Festival. It is superficially like the Chinese version of Cinema Paradiso, but so it was an appropriate end to the film festival. The love of cinema is what the stories of 1 Second and Cinema Paradiso are about, despite having different themes and tones outside of that general statement. In 1 Second, we see a great recreation of China during the Mao Zedong days. Cinema is not just great, it is some of the only culture available to people in this time. And the guys who run the cinema are having trouble with a dangerous yet lovable female vagabond who is giving them a hard time until she becomes a part of the family. Always remember that it is only natural to respond to cinema as it is the most visceral of any artistic medium, combining the existence and time that music has to the emotions of the stage and literature to the existence within the frame like a painting. Number 8. Coming from Belgium to the Toronto International Film Festival this year was Fabrice Duel's Inexorable, which to me was a thrill ride into a dark romantic world where the 1990s romantic thriller style captivated me throughout. There is a flame between a rich married man with his cleaning lady, which leads to some devastating results, but as a fan of this type of movie, I was so swept up that something that was meant to be crushing was funny to me. I'll leave it at that. The director certainly did not intend for that reaction. Maybe that says something bad about me. But you can also chalk it up to the subjective experience which any creator must do once their product is out in the public. If you like the style of a romantic movie and a thriller, with some style consistently beneath the surface and occasionally more explicitly shown in a daring balancing act, then you most certainly will enjoy Inexorable. Number 7. Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho really met my pretty high expectations that I have for any Edgar Wright movie, as he has made some hilarious ones like Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, but I'm also a Baby Driver fan. What is seen in Last Night in Soho reminded me of Baby Driver, to a theme seen in a character sense. While Baby Driver is all about escaping the current moment through music, Last Night in Soho shows escapism through a love of the 1960s. It is like a protective shield in a more nuanced way than Baby Driver, and that psychological element, as well as the dive into the unconscious mind element, which I will mention with the elaborating on, really worked for me. The revelation in the end might be obvious for some audience members, but the way we get there is very unique and creative, making this one worth watching on the big screen for the period details and trippy nature. Number 6, the movie Dashcam, coming from director Rob Savage and production company Blumhouse, really entertained me. It tells a cinematic story through the aesthetic of a live stream and starts annoying and ends in chaos. Our live streamer is a mega person, so she says stuff I don't agree with and does it in a very annoying way. That does not mean I hate her. I wanted her to survive the perils because in the end, she is lovable in her own way. So she leaves LA to visit a friend in London, England, whose girlfriend she gets in an argument with. So, as you do, she steals his car and does his Uber Eats job for a bit, basically to drive them nuts, only to do some human trafficking. Then, that's when it gets hectic. She is trafficking a demon. This turns out to be a much gorier and funnier, while okay, not better version of the Blair Witch Project. It is a movie that some people seem to dislike because they disagree with the main character's politics, but that to me seems like a dumb reason to hate this very entertaining movie. Number 5, the French trip fest flick called After Blue with Dirty Paradise is an erotic sci-fi acid western, which means it's weird, but it's also part of this weird movement known as cinema, of incoherence, which has a bunch of rules. It's like Dogma 95, but it's all about combining genres and making in situ cinema, which I think is nonsense. Then again, I imagine the filmmakers do too. But the end result in this movie is loads of strange fun. From the girl-on-girl action, to the phantasmagoric images, to the violence. This is my kind of flick. I especially enjoyed watching it at midnight during a TIFF Midnight Madness screening, having my good share of alcohol that night. It's always fun to be semi-conscious for at least part of the movie to wake up to pure insanity. I love the colors and texture to this weird movie, directed by Bertrand Mandicio. He is a master. He is one man after TIFF 2021 that I will be tuned into for the future. Number 4, indentured servitude, or rather modern-day slavery in Brazil, is the topic of the upcoming Netflix movie called Seven Prisoners, which really challenges your identification and sympathy for our protagonist seen in this film. He is a nice young man who loves his family, but goes off to work to become a slave, then gets a promotion as someone who keeps other slaves in check. He goes from nice guy to compromised to awful. It is an interesting, dramatic progression and suggests that civilization is stripped while we are in a prolonged, dangerous primal state. So if you like moral complexity, still in an entertaining, slick, dramatic product, make sure to hit the notification button on Netflix for this one. It is not graphically violent, but it shows something that really happens in Brazil. People sign up for jobs and travel somewhere only to end up in slavery, which is quite a dramatic scenario for a movie to have. Number 3, the Tim Roth starring movie Sundown is psychologically real, cruel, and unfortunately hilarious to me. But how I might react might be different than how you react, but I will not accept judgment about how it landed for me. Tim Roth's character is married to a very wealthy woman, but on a family holiday in Mexico, he decides to lie about missing his passport and just stick around by the beach, effectively abandoning his family. He gets a Mexican girlfriend and basically floats around for a while, but thankfully things do pick up from a plot perspective. In fact, quite a lot happens, and the implication of this act are quite profound, as this is a thing that happens. It seems to come from nowhere, but his whole unseen life was the groundwork, and the result amused me, as much as it confused me, despite being a realistic act. It might just bend your mind as well. So check out this dramatic piece of work. Number 2, the movie From France, titled France, is not about the creation of the nation state. It is about a TV host whose first name is France, and it looks at the fun times but diabolical elements of being a certain type of TV host. She basically has zero integrity, which is a big dramatic element here. The money is nice, but what that eventually does to the soul is explored nicely and honestly. It is also neat to see this story set in Europe, not America. We see humorously how she edits her reporting, dishonestly, but her and her producer are very charming, so we become complicit in their sketchy behavior. Maybe some of us would even cheer it on at times. The movie has some light operatic melancholy to it, which works for me, and some of the tunes from the soundtrack still get hummed by me on occasion. It would be great to have it on a CD, so if you like bold media critique movies, you could not do much better than France these days. Number 1. Titan is French for nipple, and in my opinion, it's the best movie of 2021, and the jury of the Cannes Film Festival, headed by Spike Lee, agrees that it is incredible, and it won the Palme d'Or this year before coming to TIFF. It came to TIFF, played at Beyond Fest in 35mm, and is now available to the public. I've now seen it 3 times, and every time it gets richer, more textured, as well as being a consistent thrill ride. It tells the story of an exotic dancer who happens to kill a few people, as well as getting impregnated by a car, body horror style. But the high intensity gets diverted to another character and storyline that deconstructs what we just experienced. This high-octane throat kick of a movie manages to be emotionally sweet at times, making it a balanced experience of sorts, but this is not for the weak of heart, as 2 people passed out while watching it in Toronto.